substance. So unaona the third picture, hatuna ile mafuta yenye ilikuwa huko juu. Hiyo mafuta imekuwa sasa broken down into tiny particles na bile. So tunaona hiyo mafuta imekuwa broken down into tiny particles na bile, ikaingia ndani ya the watery substance. So in the watery substance, it can easily be acted upon by the enzymes. As you can see, the last picture, the fourth picture, the fats are now being acted upon by the enzymes. The enzymes zinasaidia kufanya nini? The enzymes zinasaidia kuhydrolyze ama break down further ndio zikuwe absorbed into the body. As you can see, enzyme, emulsified fat, blah blah blah, and the story continues. So that's just what this particular picture here explains. This particular chemical diagram in explain to venye the bonds are being broken down by bile, and then later being broken down or emulsified by bile, and then later being hydrolyzed by vitu kama lipase and the enzymes. So in the enterohepatic circulation, this is what happens. Entero inamanishanga to more or less intestines. Entero ni intestines, hepatic ni liver. So the intestinal liver circulation of what I've talked about. So in the gallbladder, bile is stored, and then the bile is released into the small intestine, and then the bile emulsifies fats, and then the remaining bile is reabsorbed into the blood, taken to the liver. It's taken to the liver and it is reused in the liver. And in the colon, bile that has been trapped by soluble fiber is excreted kama fecal matter. That's how bile circulates in our system. So we'll talk more about that. This one is just the same thing. So once all that has happened, tumeona the bile, the fats zimekuwa broken down into small fat particles kama glycerol, monotriglyceride, ama short chained and medium chained fatty acids zimekuwa broken down na zikaingia into the bloodstream kama glycerol, short or medium chained fatty acids. So when they get into the bloodstream, they'll also get into the lymphatic system as missiles, and they normally diffuse into the intestinal cell walls, alafu zinaingia into the lymphatic system. And they are in the lymphatic system, they are reassembled kama triglycerides and then packed with proteins called chloromicrons. And chloromicrons alafu zinakuwa in circulation. So absorption of fats, this is how it happens. Number one, glycerols and small lipids zinakuwa absorbed through the intestines, zinaingia into the lymphatic system, and then later into the blood. And then there are some large lipids kama monoglyceride and the long-chain fatty acids zina combine with other things kama bile to form micelles that are sufficiently water soluble to penetrate the watery solution. So zinaingia ndani ya damu and all that, and then they circulate into the system. So how are lipids transported? That is now absorption. Tumeona venye zinakuwa absorbed na zinaingia into the system. Zinapitia tu hizi cells into the lymphatic system. So how are they now transported into the system? Juu damu is largely water, na lipids unajua huwa hazikuangi dissolving in water, na damu hazinakuanga maji. So lipids are normally transported in blood in form of lipoproteins. Lipoproteins is an amalgamation of lipids na other water-soluble substances kama protein. So proteins coat the lipid. I don't know whether I should draw this. Okay, I don't want to use my pen today. Proteins coat the lipid. Ama engulf the lipid. So that it can easily just be transported in the watery blood. And there are four types of lipoproteins in the body. Kuna chylomicrons, and they're normally large, and they're the least dense. They're normally formed in the liver. And then the other lipoprotein is very low density lipoprotein. They are made in the liver. They normally shift. Alafu kuna LDL. LDL is the low density lipoprotein. It's normally referred to as the bad cholesterol, and why inakwanga too bad when ikiwa mingi. So the cell normally needs it, and it's regulated by the liver. The amounts are regulated by the liver. And then we have the good cholesterol, or the high density lipoprotein. These are ways in which fats are transported in the blood. And high density lipoprotein, they normally help in removing excess cholesterol from cells, from blood, and they carry cholesterols to liver for recycling. And then they always help in anti-inflammatory properties, in reducing things like pain, swellings, reddening. Yeah. And they also have lipids, also have some health implications that we'll look into. So this is how they look. Those are the four ways in which lipids zinakuwa transported in blood. Zinakuwa transported in your blood as good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, chylomicron, and very low density cholesterol. I believe we're all together. I really feel like this topic is boring. I don't know. But it is very, very essential. Unajua hizi vitu zitawasaidia sana kushughulikia patients wenye wako na heart conditions, digestive issues, patients wenye wako na cardiovascular conditions na endocrine conditions. Endocrine conditions kama diabetes, cardiovascular conditions kama pressure, digestive conditions kama bile stone, gallbladder stones, and hizo. So it's very, very essential to note. Actually, we'll have one question. About 5 questions will come from what we've studied in facts. 5 questions in our Sunday exams. 5 questions will come from facts. So I think this one here I've explained how all this happens, but I'll explain again. So I'll explain again. Now, I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. And this is a very good diagram of explaining it. And so tumeona there are four ways in which lipids are transported in our blood. Number one is chylomicrons, and chylomicrons are normally zinakuwa absorbed directly into the blood. And chylomicrons normally deliver dietary lipids to most of the body cells. Tulisema lipids ama fats zinakuwa transported in your body in different ways. Now, these lipids are essential for body functions kama energy. So chylomicrons huwa zinaendanga kwa muscles and other fat cells. And as cells remove lipids from chylomicrons, it becomes a smaller chylomicron remnant. And some of the chylomicron remnants was inaendanga into the liver to be recycled. And then we have other things like low density lipoprotein, which delivers lipids to body cells or returns to the liver. And then high density lipoprotein, what it always does inarudisha, it always delivers excess cholesterol to the liver for excretion so that the cholesterol can be excreted. That is what high density lipoprotein is. It's a good kind of cholesterol due in a regulate cholesterol levels in your blood. It will always take a motive in excess back to the liver. Yeah. Very low density. Um, it also very low density delivers lipids, inapeleka fats to muscles and your fat cells. They're used for energy in the muscles, they're used for energy in the fat cells, or they are stored also. So what are some of the roles of triglycerides or the roles of fats? So they normally provide the cells with energy, virtually unlimited ability to store fat energy in the body. So they store energy, they provide cells with energy, the fats that we eat. That's why they should be transported to different parts of your body in the law design that they should be transported in 4 different ways. And then number two, they're normally stored also in adipose tissues or adipose cells. And adipose tissues normally just helps in the secretion of hormone. And then secondly, these fats normally help in insulating our skin, from UV rays. They normally help in shock absorption. As we saw in the cells, phospholipids are greatly needed. And then in cell signaling pathways, the hormones, they carry the hormones and all that. So this is how an adipose cell looks like. An adipose cell near a fat cell. This is how it looks like. It has a cytoplasm or a cell nucleus. A cell nucleus hapo hivyo ndio kuna DNA. And then we have a very large fat globule. Very large fat globule in here. So newly imported triglyceride first form small droplets in the periphery, in the end parts, in the tail parts of the cell, then merge with the large central globule. And so on. So this is how fats are stored in adipose cells. So we saw that there are two kinds of essential fatty acids. Kuna linoleic and linolenic. That is the vitamin, not vitamin, but omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. The essential fats that should always be taken from our diet daily, and they can be used to make other fatty acids. Mm. Feel audible. Linolenic acid inakwanga omega-6 fatty acid, hiyo ni linolenic. Alafu linolenic ni omega-6 fatty acid. Can someone remind us the sources of omega-6 fatty acid? That is linoleic. Can someone remind us its sources?
We said corn oil, sunflower oil.
Who is talking?
Jenny was trying to remember there was corn flour and sunflower oil.
Mm-hmm. Ni nani anaongea tena sasa? I'm not able to see who is speaking. I really love to know my students. Okay, they don't want to speak anymore. Okay. But I had someone talk about corn, sunflower seeds. They're essentially just found in nuts and seeds. Alafu tuko na linolenic, which is omega-3 fatty acids. Some of the sources ni DHA and EPA. And DHA is DHA inakwanga abundant sana kwa akili, like in the brain. And those are the two types of omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA. Na kuna kwanga na supplements za DHA, EPA, and all that. Na zinakwanga na different roles that they play in the body.
Is 21.
So the interesting thing about omega-3 fatty acids actually, inasaidianga sana for pains. Relieving pain sana. A good example ni flax seeds. Inakwanga na lot of omega-3 fatty acids na flax seeds zinakwanga nzuri sana for inflammatory conditions kama kidney diseases. Other essential fatty acids, nadhani nafaa tumewapatia assignment, muangalie differences za DHA and EPA. We'll see what to do. But we'll talk about them even more. That's why nazipitia haraka when talking about diseases. We'll talk about them a little more in depth. So
In past life, you were a healer. Take test.
yeah, I think this should be all. Acha tuangalie diseases such as your time. I see it's 9. I want us to look at the health benefits, health effects of saturated fats, trans fats, and cholesterol. And mostly, we look at something called blood lipid profile. Ukitaka kujua the levels of some of these things in your blood, and the fats in your blood, and mostly saturated fats, trans fats, and cholesterol. As it ukiwa na mgonjwa mwenye ako na any lifestyle condition, you should always advise them not to eat products that have saturated trans fats and cholesterol. For saturated products, then it's got a long chain saturated fatty acids. You should always advise them from eating them. So, in heart diseases, there is normally elevated blood cholesterol. Cholesterol tuliona they come to us from animal products, na pia tuliona they come majorly dietary. There are two sources of cholesterol. There is dietary cholesterol, ama the cholesterol that you get by eating. Alafu kuna the one that the liver forms. So when we check dietary sources of cholesterol, mostly if it becomes oxidized, an example, fried eggs, if it becomes oxidized, inakuwa mbaya. So elevated blood cholesterol levels inakuanga mbaya. And what are some of the things that elevates blood cholesterol levels? Number one is saturated fats. And if your saturated fats intake is increased, cholesterol levels in the blood will rise. How? Because increased saturated fatty intake can increase low density lipoprotein, which is the bad cholesterol, and this will promote blood clotting, na itakuwa increase the chances of kupata conditions kama stroke. And then there are some dietary choices kama kukula foods without fiber, ina increase ama ina elevate hapa hivi nitawauliza maswali mengi. Dietary choices. So I was talking about dietary choices. How does our dietary choices elevate blood cholesterol levels? Juu hatutaki our blood cholesterol levels zikuwe elevated. So number one, if you take highly refined products zenye highly refined carbohydrates, to be specific, vitu kama white rice, vitu kama white wheat flour, these things that have very high amounts of glucose in them, very high amounts of calories in them, they normally tend to increase blood cholesterol levels. They normally tend to increase triglyceride levels in the blood. The other thing that increases or elevates blood cholesterol is trans fatty acid, and we saw where trans fats are found. So an increase in low density cholesterol, increased intake of trans fats in increased low density cholesterol, the bad kind of cholesterol. And then we have dietary sources of cholesterol. So if you take dietary sources of cholesterol, kama eggs, a lot of it will be interfering with the normal balance of the cholesterols that are just in your body. Na tuliona cholesterol yenye iko kwa mwili ni gani? Mbili, LDL ziko tatu. LDL, HDL na VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, VLDL. So if you take dietary sources, the liver already produces enough amount of cholesterol that you need as a person. So if you increase your intake of dietary cholesterol, if you have utakuwa una interfere na LDL, you'll be interfering with HDL, which essentially is just elevate your blood cholesterol level, na hii itakuwa tatizo sana. So dietary sources of cholesterol, we saw there's milk, there's fish, and there's meat, or rather flesh, na vitu kama hizo. So we've talked about heart diseases. Let's talk about cancer. So saturated fatty acids, trans fats, and oxidized cholesterol promotes initiation of cancer. Actually, these are some of the things that cancer feeds on. Vitu kama saturated fatty acids, trans fats, cholesterol, kama ziko kwa diet, hata nikikudunga shindano ya cancer, huwezi kuwa na cancer kabisa. Huwezi kabisa. So dietary fat and cancers are normally in the rise. Siku hizi juu ya our wrong choices of fats. But this normally differs from one cancer to the other. And then we have obesity. Saturated fats, trans fats, and cholesterols are one of the major reasons why obesity or overweight is on the rise. One of the surest way of gaining weight ni kukula vyakula zenye ziko na high caloric content in them. Why? Because foods that have high caloric content in them zina increase vitu kama the bad cholesterols in your blood. High calories are normally stored as fat in your body. And when you take a lot of fats also with them, you even make it even worse. So cutting fat from diet reduces calories. So the more the fat, the more the calories, the more the processed carbohydrate, also the more the calories. So dietary recommendations are really needed. You need to cut on your fats. You need to take whole grain carbohydrates or kula refined, so that you can avoid getting weight. So naweza uliza swali kama what are some of the dietary recommendations that you would give to someone with obesity, maswali rahisi kama hizo, ama what is the link between cancer and lipids? What's the link between cancer and lipids? Vitu kama hizo, or rather what are some of the ways in which our blood cholesterols can be raised in the system 10 marks. Vitu tu kama hizo, vitu zenye zitakuwa zinakusaidia sana kuongea na patients wako, things that, yeah, something. So the daily required intake, or rather, and the dietary guidelines, when it comes to fats, you should eat a diet that is low in saturated fats and trans fats. And then the diet should always be low in cholesterol. 20 to 35% of your daily energy should be from fats, not more. Not more than that. And then you should always check your food labels for saturated fats and cholesterol. Ukiona any food label with trans fats in it, ukiangalia mafuta yako uone kuna some trans fats, it's not a good kind of fat to take. Yeah. So what are some of the replacements that we can use? What are some of the things that we can take? So let's take, for example, in heart diseases, we can replace saturated fats with unsaturated fats. We saw that there are two kinds of what? Triglycerides, saturated and unsaturated. Na tuliona sources unsaturated. So when someone has heart disease, any kind of heart disease, any kind, arterial fibrillation, mitral valve, stenosis, any kind of heart disease, you should always you should always advise them to replace saturated fats with unsaturated. And you know the sources of unsaturated fats, we talked about them. And then you should always advise them to regularly consume, omega-3 fatty acids, vitu kama flax seeds, vitu kama olive oil. Regularly consume nuts and seeds, because number one, they'll help in suppressing inflammation. Tumeona venye I said earlier that omega-3 fatty acid greatly helps in reducing inflammation. Inflammation, as I mentioned in yesterday's class, to those who attended class yesterday, umoja tu kwa na class jana. We said that inflammation is just the way your body responds to disease, vitu kama infection. Let's say you're infected with H. pylori, how does your body probably respond? You have a wound somewhere, umekuwa scratched, ama umeanguka, your bone ikavunjika. How does your body respond to that? That is what is called inflammation, how your body responds to the abnormal actions, the abnormalities that comes to the body. So and then when you're inflamed, kunakuanga pains and several things. So omega-3 fatty acids inakuanga a very powerful pain reliever. So and that's why okay, achana now. So I want to talk about some kind of oil that will bring several controversies. So we have cancer. In cancer patients, you should always increase omega-3 fatty acids from food. This is now cancer and fats. We'll talk about cancer and what? Carbohydrates. We'll talk about cancer and proteins. We'll talk about cancer and those other things as well. So cancer and fats. Omega-3 fatty acids should be increased. There are several supplements with omega-3 fatty acids. Some unaweza tumia the nuts and the seeds that we mentioned in our last class. Yeah. So these are some of these. This is a practical way you can replace saturated fatty acids with unsaturated. Let's say you're probably using butter to bake, or you're using butter to do what? Butter inakuanga na a lot of saturated fatty acids in it. Unajua hapa hivi nikisema low intake, nikisema diet should be low in saturated fats and trans fat, inamaanisha plant products. The plant products peke yake ndio iko na low saturated fatty acids, as you can even see in the table. Unaona, yeah. So let's say butter, you can replace it with olive oil. Bacon, you can replace it with sunflower. If potato chips, these are your deep fried potatoes, inakwanga na a lot of unsaturated trans fats, but saturated fatty acid iko chini, lakini hizo chips hazikwangi nzuri juu ya the trans fatty acids in them. Cheese, si poa, steak si poa. So you can always replace them with avocado, mixed nuts, sunflower, olive oil with plant sources na vitasaidia sana, so that you can escape, the dangers that comes with using a lot of saturated fatty acids. One of the questions I'll ask, if I remember, um, what are some of the health impacts, the negative health impacts of saturated fatty acids? So the recommended intakes of mono and polyunsaturated fatty acids are those. We are not nutritionists, so hatutakuwa tunafanya hizi calculations, and the body always know what to do with excesses. Ukikula good kinds of fats kama poly and unsaturated fatty acids in excess, it's very difficult to eat them in excess. But ukikula in excess, the body knows what to do with them. Let's say you take zinc from pumpkin seeds na uzitumie in excess, the body will know what to do with the excess. But kama it's not from good sources, zinakwanga a little adulterated pia, the body will not know what to do with them na zitaleta mashida. So from guidelines to groceries, so from what we've talked about, how can we choose what we eat and all that? So fats help in hmm, mm, I think hizi tutaongelea siku nyingine. From guidelines, we've talked about several things, so tunataka kuona venye tunaweza kuwa practical with them in choosing flavors, textures, and palatability of food. So you should know that fat-soluble vitamins, zini, A, D, E, and K. So it is very essential for us to cook with our vegetables with fats. The vitamins normally comes to us from the vitamins normally comes to us mostly from vegetables and fruits. So when cooking your vegetables, ensure that you always at least cook with good kinds of fats, kama ni coconut, sunflower, red palm, vitu kama hizo. Yeah. And the flavor, when you eat, when you cook with flour, with fats, it adds some flavor or texture to it, palatability. Jaribu kupika mboga bila mafuta na upike na mafuta, uniambie kesho the difference. Okay, tomorrow we won't have a class. Uniambie on Sunday, uniambie on Sunday the difference when mboga yenye imepikwa, sukuma yenye imepikwa na mafuta, it has some flavor and some texture that is different from the one that is cooked without. And the one that is cooked with oil is a little, it's more palatable than the one cooked without oil. So when we'll be talking about proteins, we'll see how we can select proteins. So vegetables, fruits, and grains are the best ways you can lower your consumption of various fats in the diet. Really continually seeing your vegetables and fruits should always be eaten in the largest amount. Now, pure fruits and vegetables should not be eaten together. So taking vegetables, fruits, and grains lowers our consumption of various fats. And then solid fats and oils should really not be used. And where do we find them? In fried and baked food. And we should choose wisely. And processed, we should choose our foods wisely. And in choosing wisely, what I simply mean is you should always choose unprocessed foods. They're the safest. That's why I highly respect those who get food from their shamba. Those who stay in the countryside and just do farming and all that. I highly respect such people. And you'll always find that they're the most intelligent in terms of how they reason and all that. So read the food labels as well. It will really help. Ukienda kwa supermarket, some hizo ingredients, look at the total fat. Look at total fats. Look at the enter. Redemption, I see your hand is raised. You can raise your concern.
You are not. I'm not getting you because it's as if you are breaking. Friend.
Nimeanza kubreak wapi?
When you're talking, you are not continuous. You are breaking. It's as if I don't know whether it's network or what the problem.
For me, I've been listening to you, so maybe the problem is on her side.
Oh, the problem is
And also, there's a question I wanted to ask now. What's the problem? Why you say that vegetable food problem?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question that we'll look at. Don't worry, we'll look at it. So you should read your food labels. There's the total fats, unafaa uangalie the saturated fats, the trans fats, and cholesterol. You should just always try and compare products. Jana nilishangaa sana kuona uji inauzwa supermarket, imewekwa kwa shelf na iko na expiry date. Inakaa kwa shelf for 2 weeks, ina expire after 2 weeks. That was new. Probably, I really don't know if we are hearing that for the first time. And probably there are some of us who are not hearing that from the first time. I think I've been living under the cage. Under. Okay. Chani na jokes nikuwe serious kidogo. Because we have several sites here to go. But it was interesting to me. There's a time that I saw the very bill called packaged, ukaandikiwa expiry date 2 weeks from today. Unashangaa. So high fat foods, are they friends of I thought tungemaliza hivi. Oh, there are 6 more plays to go. We have 9 minutes left. You guys will just be a little patient to me. Redemptor, you can kindly mute your microphone. No, thank you. So guidelines for fat intake, very, very essential. So high fat foods, are they our friends or are they our foe? Foe ni enemy. So we should limit saturated fats and trans fat intake. If we do this, we'll be moderating calories. We should also take enough fats for good health and not too much of the harmful fats. So the daily recommendations hizo nilisema si lazima. And then high fat foods and heart health. Kuna vitu kama olive oil, which is very, very good for heart. And you can use olive oil to replace as a replacement for saturated fats. And then we have nuts. And tutaona nuts huwa zina ensure that the low density cholesterol is not raised. Nuts is a very good way of, consuming your fat. It has fat, the composition of the fats that are in nuts inakwanga mzuri if you take them as whole as possible. And then they have several benefits for your heart health. Yeah. And so there's fish yenye inakwanga na omega-3 fatty acid. Tuliona omega-3 fatty acid ni nzuri and it's very good for heart health. Lakini fish inakwanga fagio ya like it's ni fagio tu ya if it's from a fish pond, if it's from a lake. The fish is more or less the dustbin ya uchafu zote zenye ziko kwa lake ama the fish pond or whatever. So it's normally not really that recommended to get your omega-3 fatty acids from fish. You'd rather get them from plant sources. And then we have saturated fats and the low density cholesterol. Some of the sources ni hizo meat, whole milk products, tropical oils, the vegetable oils. So Zero saturated fats is not possible due even the plant sources ziko na saturated fats, but in very low quantities that easily agrees with our body as it will affect negatively. So we should always source for them. We should always just eat the plant sources freely and highly. And then we have trans fats, which are normally just limited to hydrogenated foods, vitu kama baked foods, deep fried foods, na hizo vitu zote zenye tulitaja in our last class. So hii table nitawatumia. They are the healthful fatty acids. Healthful fatty acids ni mono unsaturated, utazipata kwa avocado, kwa mafuta kama canola, olive, peanut, sesame, in nuts like almonds, cashew, filberts, hazelnuts, macadamia nuts, peanuts, pecans, pistachio. Hizi vitu zote ziko Kenya, hizo nuts zote zenye unaona kwa your screen. And then we have olives, we have peanut butter, and then we have seeds or sesame. Hizo ziko na monounsaturated fatty acids, which are very good for your heart health and the cardiovascular health. And then we have omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, which we can find in oils, kama corn, cottonseed. If you eat corn whole, if you eat cottonseed whole, safflower whole, and soybean whole. Na pia on nuts, they should be eaten whole, pine nuts, walnuts whole. And then we have seeds kama pumpkin na sunflower. Yeah, and alafu kuna omega-3 polyunsaturated of which ziko kwa fish, fatty fish, na tumeona the reasons mbona tufai kutumia fish. Alafu unaweza zipata, the best sources ni flax seeds na nuts. Vitu zenye ufai kutumia ni trans fats. Zinapatikana wapi? In fried foods. Zinapatikana wapi? In margarine. Margarine is hydrogenated partially ama fully. And trans fatty acids zinapatikana in non-dairy creams, zinapatikana in many fast foods, in shortenings. Trans fats are the worst. Zinapatikana in commercial baked goods, vitu kama donuts, cakes, cookies, biscuits. They are the worst kinds of fats that you can always take. Tutumia hata nyama. And many snack foods. By the way, rutumia nyama kuliko mkate. Ama cookies, ama biscuits. I'm not saying that eating meat is okay. I'm just trying to say if we try and compare saturated fats and trans fats, saturated fats are better. Yeah, so saturated fats pia zinapatikana kwa bacon, butter, chocolate, coconut. Na unafaa avoid the animal sources of saturated fats. Why? Because the animal sources of saturated fats ziko na long chain saturated fatty acids, na the plant sources ziko na short chain. Na tuliona the short chained saturated fatty acids, they can easily break in the body, they can easily be hydrolyzed, na ziletangi shida mingi na zinakwanga in very low quantities. So this is our last slide, and this is where we end our class for today. I won't take any questions because of time today. Redemptor asked about why shouldn't we take vegetables and fruits at the same time. Their digestion span equal very different. If you take them at the same time, zitaanza kuleta digestive problems juu there's a lot of fermentation that will happen. Vegetables zinakuanga na some kind of carbohydrate that we'll see, cellulose, yenye inakuanga very hard to break and all that. But cooking vegetables when breaking it kidogo and all that. Lakini juu vegetables zinashukua very long time to break, na it will cause a lot of fermentation. That's one. And then number two, fruits are majorly taken raw. And so when fruits are majorly taken raw foods should always be taken in an empty stomach. Essentially, due there are enzymes that should act on these particular raw foods. Zenye ziki, yeah. And raw foods are digested a little bit faster, ama haraka. So if you mix raw foods and cooked foods, kidogo fermentation inaweza fanyika. and you'll be affecting your health. So that's it. But we'll talk about it further when talking about the digestive system and conditions the digestive system. For now, you just allow me say a closing prayer, and then we malize recording, and then we meet on Sunday. If you have a question, you can always reach out to me through a call. Let's believe and pray. We thank you, Lord, for today's session. May you help us to remember all that we've studied is my prayer, trusting and believing in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a blessed day.
Sorry, before you go, Adezel. Hello.
Yes.
How can I get the PowerPoint slides, because I was late?
You'll get them in the group. I'll just finish the editing, Leo. I'm not today. You'll get them in the course of the day tomorrow. I really hope I won't forget. If I forget, you can kindly just give me a call and remind me. Nitatuma by saa sita kesho.
Okay.
I'll just need to go through. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.